Hey everyone, welcome to a new week's podcast for Unscrambled Faith. I'm your host, Megan Clark, and how am I feeling? I am feeling grateful that you chose to listen in on this episode. I feel like I'm about to sound like a decor piece that we put in our house. I'm feeling grateful that I'm feeling good mentally, spiritually, and you know what? It's interesting because I normally would have otherwise given myself a hard time for not recording last week like I thought I wanted to, but I think it's been about 2 weeks since the last podcast recording. And here's the thing. I'm a huge advocate for not only authenticity, but showing up genuinely whenever, not necessarily like when the time is right per se, because when is it ever going to be the right time, but just showing up, I guess really just that, showing up authentically and wanting to record whenever it feels right, it feels good, I have something to say. I knew that I didn't want to get to a point with this podcast that I was recording for one weekly, because I was definitely getting burnt out with that. But also I didn't want to make it to where I felt forced to do it, because I feel like when, it's like when we have something that we're doing that we enjoy, and then after a while we're doing it because it turns into like a chore, or it's a part of my checklist, or it could be that it's a habit. After a while, it kind of loses its meaning, right? It loses its meaning, it loses its credibility. And I also feel like, at the same time that it's not, I feel like the vibe that you're going to get from the person showing up otherwise is not going to hit the same. The vibe's not going to be vibing. It's not going to feel the same. And for me, I was talking, was it this week? Yeah, this week to my therapist, because I've switched to going every other week now. However, when I was talking to her this week, that in a way is kind of like what I shared with her. Specifically, just literally like what I just said. And I told her, I was like, as much as I want to show up here and I want to record this and I want to connect with you guys and my audience on a weekly basis, if I otherwise feel like that God hasn't put a word on my heart, or I'm not feeling inspired, or it's just not the right time, I know, because I enjoy doing this, that I'm going to get back to it. But it's when I want to get back to it. And I know there's a balance between, I was like, okay, I don't really want to go into like the third week per se when I'm not recording, but I knew that I also didn't want to record last week because I was just like in a funky kind of like headspace. I am going through some things. I was going through some things. And I felt like I couldn't actually be fully present with you, if I did it last week. And I think that's important. I think it's important to set a boundary. Basically, I've talked about that before. We've shared moments like that before, right? Throughout this journey of this podcast, that boundaries are important no matter what they look like. But more importantly, I think, for me, a lesson for myself is like setting a boundary for myself. And, I had a very productive week, very busy, but very productive week. I was absolutely loving it. I was on cloud 9 with it. But I knew that like going into this week that I was like, okay, this feels right. This feels good. And also, I know I say this all the time, but I love the fact that I don't necessarily have not only just a schedule per se that I'm sticking to with this podcast, but the fact that I don't want to necessarily, I remember there was a time, I believe it was like last year, when I had like generalized ideas of things that I wanted to talk about, like touch points, things that I wanted to share, go into more depth about. And that felt right for that season. But going into like this year, it's very different. This year I was like, especially I feel like around like maybe the 6-month mark this year, where we're like about 5-6 months into the year this year. It was more like, you know what, instead of doing a list, I really just want to hand it over to God, and I want it to be not only authentic, but just genuine. And whenever I'm in, like if I have a moment during the week before I plan on recording and I'm inspired, or something that I, have a conversation with somebody, whatever the case may be. I love the fact that it presents itself. I think that's what I want to say. Is that whatever I am supposed to be talking about, whatever's right, whatever it's meant to be for me to share on my heart with you, happens in a way where it just flows, right? Again, it just feels right. It's authentic. It flows. It shows up. And when I'm inspired, I'm like, okay, I'm going to lean into it like it's my superpower, and then I'm going to go because it just feels good. And that's what today's about. That's what I'm feeling today, is that I'm feeling good. And I was like, you know what? Today's the day. And it's funny because it's not a Tuesday, right? And that's another thing, is for so long, I stuck to a schedule where it was like, okay, I'm going to therapy, and then right after therapy, I'm going to come home, and then I'm going to record the podcast. And for quite a while, that's what I've done. But at this point, it's like, okay, I know that I need to record the podcast at some point this week. And some weeks are going to look different for me than others. Sometimes it can very well be that I will stick to the time slot that I have to record. Otherwise, if it just doesn't feel right, I'm not going to do it. Now, I understand that that's not a luxury for everything in life. And I understand that that is definitely a blessing in itself. But it just feels good. It also partially may have to do a little bit with the fact that it is, I believe, 81 degrees out right now. 80, 81. And it feels incredible. I didn't spend as much time outside today that I was where I was like yesterday. So let's catch y'all up a little bit about like what's been going on in my life. So I know that I briefly shared my basket business, which I'm having so much fun with. It's an incredible time also for me to be doing this, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the process. I'm enjoying the fact that I'm able to not only be like a blessing to others, but I'm able to tap into my creative side. So that is definitely, I hit the ground running on it, and I feel like it was definitely the perfect time to do so, because at this point, I won't necessarily say it's not like busy in a bad way, but there's a flow that's taking place, and I'm here for it. Also, what's pretty interesting too is I think it was about, maybe, gosh, what's it been, like maybe 2-3 months now? 2 months, 3 months, something like that. They started delivering in the morning with Amazon Flex, and I absolutely love that because I'm able to kind of break my days up into thirds or fourths where, I have different hats that I'm wearing throughout like the day to day. And one thing that, if you're just jumping in the middle of this podcast season with me, or maybe perhaps this is the first episode that you're listening to or watching online, one thing that's a little fun fact about me is that I'm not officially diagnosed, but to know me, you're like, yeah, she does. So I'm a spicy brain girl. I definitely, there's some ADHD happening within this brain of mine. And one thing that I have discovered for myself specifically over the last week or two, is that not only, I would say, really going back to like the last year, I have spoken in the past about how leaning into the way that your brain works, the way that you process things, is your superpower. And what I mean by that is that whenever you have moments, kind of like how I have right now, where there's like this burst of energy, or perhaps you're feeling inspired, the timing itself is going to be different for everybody, but it's important to lean into that, because whenever you're leaning into that, my friends, is your superpower. And I have, more or less focused more on that like over the last year. And so over the last couple of weeks, it was almost like my brain was like, you know what, let's take that a step further. And what I ended up doing was, now where my days used to be maybe like blank slate, and let's just see what happens, and I'm going to be productive today, but every day is going to look a little bit different. And maybe I would do maybe like 1 to 2 things within my businesses for the day, and then kind of like clock out, so to speak, from my jobs that I do, and then let's just see what the rest of the day takes us. And my weeks would kind of be blocked off. Versus now I find that I love the fact that I have like set things from like, this time earlier in the morning to like, let's just say like from like 6 to 9 or 7 to 10, I'm delivering orders in the morning. And then I have about an hour or 2 in between. And then maybe I'm doing something that's productive with my basket business, my personal shopper business. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm good there. And then I'm going to segue, and then I'm going to put another hat on with my fragrance business that I have. And, you know, with that, I find it's like, no matter like, speaking into your day to day, it's like breaking it up into like segments, and then making sure that I'm not, because the way that my brain goes a lot of times is that, and maybe you can relate to this, is that when I have like a project, whether I'm wanting to get mail outs out, or it could be that maybe I have like a home project, you know, that I've been working on for a while now. A lot of times I put this immense amount of pressure on myself that if I don't finish it like within the day, then I'm gonna feel like I failed myself. I'm gonna feel like I didn't meet the standards, you know, like where my goals were. Or perhaps it's just like, okay, I may be feeling physically tired. I may be, it's mentally daunting. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep pushing through because I just want to get it done. And I don't want it to like overlap until like the next day. Or more importantly, like, what about when you have an appointment? What if you have to go pick up somebody from like work or school, or you have an appointment somewhere, and then you're in the middle of working on something, and then you have to pause what you're working on and then come back to it later? That would always get under my skin, and it would irk me to no end. And it bothered me so much, to the fact that now I know that there's certain things like that, that if I have somewhere that I have to specifically be that day at a certain time, it's almost like my brain, not even on purpose, but it's kind of like my brain almost just like starts planning out, okay, Megan, you know, you've got this bigger project, this thing that might take a little bit more time, or you don't want to rush on. Let's put a pin in that and then save that for like after your appointment, or on a day where you have a little bit more flow. You know, you don't have to necessarily like be pressed for time somewhere, right? And then there's other moments where it's like, okay, I have an appointment later today. I have to leave this certain amount of time. And if you know, you know, if like you have an appointment and you're like, okay, I have a doctor's appointment 2 days from now. That means that I have to set my alarm for this time. That means that I have to set in another alarm to remind me to get ready. And what's crazy is like, I don't know if you can relate to this, but let's just say I had an appointment at like 3 p.m. today. Yes, my appointment's at 3, but I've mapped out my day all the way from like 2 p.m. first thing in the morning before, to make sure that I'm knocking things off as I go. And it's interesting because my brain almost like rewinds. It's the opposite. It's not like, okay, when I first wake up in the morning, this is what I'm going to start doing. No, that's actually not how my brain goes most of the time. How my brain processes those thoughts, it's more like, okay, I have an appointment at 3, and then I just start rewinding time. And it's like, okay, if I do this, this is going to take this amount of time. Okay, maybe I can't do that. Let's do this instead. And then and then it's like going all the way up into the fact of like where I end at is feed yourself some breakfast. Get something in your system. Get out of bed. Brush your teeth. Yeah. So I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but I'm loving the fact, going back to where I started at with all this, is I'm just loving the fact that now my day to day is broken up into like segments. Like my time is blocked off, and it just feels great. And it's fire. My neurons, like my brain is just firing on all cylinders. And one thing that I can tell too is like, I love, every now and then I'll take pictures of myself and I'll post them on social media, whether my stories or on my pages, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may be, and tie it in with either my businesses, or maybe I'm just posting a picture of myself because I'm feeling pretty, or like my outfit, or my having a good hair day, whatever the case may be. What I've noticed is that over the last couple of weeks, prior to me doing this with my schedule, I can see a difference with like my glow. Like I can tell not only like the inflection in my voice when I'm talking to others, but also just physically how I feel, and then mentally, and then how I also look on the outside. It's been really cool, just in a short amount of like couple of weeks, the transformation that's taken place, which is just so awesome. So let's go ahead and dive into like why we're here and what we're going to be talking about today. True tradition, I know I haven't talked about this in a while, but I figured I'd go ahead and I for sure reminded myself this morning that I was going to put on a cute pair of earrings, because I knew that I was going to record my podcast today. So with it being spooky season, if you're catching the live video, I do have my Jack Skellington earrings on. I was about to say earplugs. These aren't earplugs. My earrings on. They just so happen to actually kind of match my nails that I've got going on. But these earrings were a lot of fun. In fact, I honestly, random thought, surprised myself with the amount of collection, like the amount of earrings that I have that I love to collect. I was very shocked and surprised to find that I really don't have as many Halloween, spooky, October type earrings, fall earrings, lots and lots of Christmas. I think that partially has to do with like gifts that people have given me over the years. Or, you know, of course, there's a lot of like markets and vendor events around that time of year, like November to December. But I was actually very surprised that and I know that says a lot for me, because if you're not a collector of jewelry or earrings, you may not get it, and that's okay. But to know me again is to know that I have a wide range collection of jewelry in itself, specifically earrings. And I love like organizing them seasonally. Yes, I'm that person. But yeah, I just kind of surprised myself this morning. Random enough, I know, that whenever I was like, what am I going to wear? What earrings? Okay, October. Okay, Halloween, fall. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I think I have like 3 pairs. And I just wasn't really feeling any of them. And then that's when I remembered that I had this pair. So anyways, but without further ado, so let's talk a little bit about when good intentions get lost in translation. One thing that happened to me the other day, first and foremost, I took myself to the grocery store. And that statement alone, if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, Anne, okay, what's the big deal about you taking yourself to a grocery store? The big deal is that I do not go to the grocery store. That is one of the few places that I frequent. In fact, I really got a taste of what it was like to have groceries delivered back in, what was it, 2020, 2021. And ever since then, I haven't looked back. Every now and then I will, of course, need to go to the store to maybe grab a couple of things, or maybe if we're missing something from a recipe, or maybe if I'm wanting a random snack, whatever the case may be. But I tell you what, it has to be pretty damn special to get me to walk up into a grocery store. Because that's the last place that I want to be in, because I get overstimulated. That is a whole nother conversation for another day, but it's just not my cup of tea. So yesterday morning, I wrapped up with doing my Amazon deliveries. Whenever I got done, I knew that I needed a bunch of like sides for dinner. We had the protein, like we had all of the like steak and chicken and fish and all that stuff, right? But I needed sides. I needed salad, needed sides, all the things. So I was like, you know what? All these about to open in about an hour. Let me go ahead and drive over there, sit in the parking lot. Now, I will say, I did get a taste of what it's like to shop first thing in the morning at a grocery store on a non-holiday, non-weekend time. And I could do that. It was very doable. The parking lot was not crowded. I'm like, you know what? I think I have entered an era of my life that if and when I do, and I say this ever so lightly, if I ever need to go to the grocery store and for whatever reason can't have my groceries delivered, or for financial reasons, otherwise need to show up to the grocery store myself, I will be showing up when they first open. And 9 o'clock is perfect by me. I don't really see myself going to a grocery store any earlier than that, because that just feels intense. Unless I'm delivering groceries, because I do that sometimes too. Just for some pocket extra money. I deliver groceries sometimes. And if I'm getting paid to deliver somebody's groceries and go to the grocery store and shop and all the things, ironic or not, yes, I will do that. But when it comes to spending my own money, I'm going to have somebody bring the groceries to me. I would much rather tip somebody. I would much rather support somebody else and their business and have them do the shopping for me. But anyways, and so yesterday I found myself sitting in the grocery parking lot, and I was gathering all my things. And of course, you know, the last thing I remembered, thank goodness, was my quarter for Aldi. If you know, you know. So as I was walking to the front of the grocery store, I'm very careful, as we all should be, of my surroundings, right? So I was looking left, I was looking right, obviously making sure that cars weren't coming either way. But more importantly, because it is a somewhat busier parking lot sometimes, you just don't know who's going to be around. So I happened to see these 3 individuals that were in front of the grocery store. And who knows, to me, it's like, what time of year is it? What my brain immediately goes, of course, to my natural instinct of what are they selling? Are they panhandling? What are they selling? What are they, just making sure I'm keeping my eye on them because I'm trying to, keep myself safe. I don't know what they're doing. So I'm just trying to mind my business, of course, but at the same time, I'm like, because also, like I just shared, I don't want to be at the grocery store, but I just wanted to just kind of keep them in my corner of my eye, just be like, okay, what are they up to? So I'm proceeding to the front of the grocery store. I get my grocery cart, and I couldn't help but overhear. So keep in mind, everything that just basically processed in my mind, right? I'm thinking like, these people have bad intentions. What are they doing? What are they going to ask me for? What are they going to want? Are they raising, money for something? Or, you never know. Like, sometimes there could be people that are hard on their luck. Maybe they're, needing some help, in that area. You just never know. We have somebody that hangs out in our grocery store parking lot that plays the guitar, and he is incredible, very talented. Every now and then he's out there just performing just for fun to get his, his name out there, his music out there. And I absolutely love that. But, truth be told, these days it's just such a colorful environment and world that we're in, but we just don't know what people are going to be showing up for and, like, again, what their intentions are. So I have all of these thoughts. And if you also could hear me and you're just like, okay, yeah, she does have a little bit of spicy brain. So I have all these thoughts, right, that are like running through my mind. Meanwhile, I'm like, okay, walk to the front of the grocery store, get your grocery cart. So in earsight, I can faintly hear from a distance the group of individuals, and I could hear them, and they're talking to somebody about their church or a church. I'm going to just assume it's their church, and praying over that person. I was like, oh, that's really beautiful. That's really nice. And I will say, full transparency, that there was a moment where I was like, I really hope they don't say anything to me. And yes, I'm going to be fully transparent, because on one hand, yes, this is a faith-filled podcast. And yes, I am a huge advocate for praying. At that time, I will say also, on the other hand, that I am an empath, and I'm very protective of my energy, and I'm very protective of who I am, keeping like close contact with, as far as like physical touch or conversations that I'm having. Really just kind of find, it's hard. I wouldn't say it's hard. It's just very interesting trying to find like that balance between the two, me in the hands and feet of Jesus. But at the same time, it's like, I am very in tune with like how I'm feeling. And there's just certain spirits, there's just certain energies about individuals. And I'm like, you know what? I'm better off not. And then other times it's like, no, this feels right. Let me lean into this. Like, this is a good moment. And so in this particular moment, like I said, I had all of these thoughts beforehand where it was like, oh, I wonder what's happening, keep my distance. I heard them praying over an individual, thought that was really beautiful, but then I found it interesting at the same time that my brain segued into thinking, ooh, but I really hope they don't talk to me. I really hope they don't, say anything to me. So in that moment, I'm grabbing my cart, and one of the individuals in the group was like, oh, what do they say? Like, I hope you're having a good day. I hope you have a great day. Good morning. We love to pray over you. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. You know what? I'll catch, and this is one of the words that came out of my mouth verbatim. I was like, I'll catch you, whenever I come out of the grocery store. And then the other person in the group was like, oh, great. Okay. Sounds good. And, any other time, this wasn't yesterday, but any other time I would normally go on in the store and be like, I am going to take my sweet time, because I have days when I want to people, I know I need to people, or otherwise it's like, it just feels good, it feels intentional, I want to show up, I want to have these conversations. But there's other times where it's like, if I don't have the mental capacity to really be present with somebody, or if I'm just like on a mission, because that, once again, going back to the fact that I did not want to be at the grocery store. So I was like, well, let's wrap this up, get what I need to get, and then get on home. So I am just going about my day in the grocery store, y'all know I had a list. I was going after my list, making a plan, getting all the things in my basket. Interesting enough, I think that the past version of myself would have at another time, I would have just kept reiterating over and over and felt super anxious. Like, are they still going to be outside? Are they still going to want to talk to me? What are they going to say? Can't, all these like absurd, crazy things, right? Can they read my thoughts? Do they know really what's happening, with me? Like, do they know me? Like, or do they not know? Oh yeah. So this all this like back and forth. That would have been another version of myself. However, what I found was interesting is yesterday, I was very much at peace. I was very much at peace going through the grocery store. I didn't feel anxious. I enjoyed, for the most part, the experience of being there. And it went as smooth as it could possibly really get. And I really enjoyed it. Whenever I got to where I was checking out, at that point, it almost had it almost had left my brain that that whole conversation took place before I went to the grocery store. And I thought it was interesting because whenever I proceeded to grab my groceries, pack everything up, and walk out with the cart, they weren't there anymore. And I just thought that was interesting. And it was just kind of like an afterthought. I didn't think twice about it. Typical spicy brain. I was already moved on, right? I already moved away before that. And so what was interesting for me is like later on yesterday, like who knows, a couple hours later into like the evening, whatever. I kind of go back and I love doing like my brain does this like replay. I don't know if y'all do this or not, but my brain always does this like walkthrough of like conversations that I could have had, or maybe I did have. Could it have gone differently? Maybe there's some things I could have said, or otherwise, moments that I either take for granted or I figure is like they're very small and not really like there's nothing about it. I let it go, and then my brain will process it like later on. And what I thought was pretty interesting for me was the fact that my brain was like, I just thought to myself, why weren't they still standing out there? They said that they were going to pray over me. And I knew I wasn't in the grocery store for a long period of time because there was nobody in the grocery store. It didn't take me long at all. And so I knew I wasn't in there forever. There was a part of me that actually, I don't know if I like necessarily wanted them to be outside or expected them to be outside, but I did find it very unique that whenever I walked outside that they were gone. No sign of them. I looked over the parking lot, looked left, looked right, looked over by my car. I'm not even gonna lie. I looked over my car. I was like, do they know where I parked? As absurd as that sounds. And whenever I loaded my car up, I was like, interesting. They weren't out there for very long. So, I wanted to share that because that's going to segue a little bit into, again, just talking a little bit more today about when good intentions get lost in translation. And, for me, I'm going to be honest about like what was going on with me internally. I should say otherwise. I was honest about what was going on with me internally. But let's be honest with ourselves. So when you were hearing me share that story, maybe something perhaps came to mind of a situation, or maybe something that happened to you today or something from the past. But maybe perhaps you've been in a situation where it didn't land the way that you intended it. Or maybe perhaps it didn't hit like the way you thought it was going to go. But let's be honest about what's going on internally with ourselves. It could have been in that situation that came to mind for you, that you felt doubt, hurt, frustration, or exhaustion, that you may have otherwise filtered how you received their word. Maybe someone spoke something to you, kind of like how the group of individuals was, right? That they were like, hey, we'd love to pray for you. Good morning. Hope you have a great day. I mentally say that there was a brief moment where I perceived that and I took that on like in the wrong way. But then I also thought it was interesting how my brain almost like counteracted and then switched it up. And then like what came out of my mouth was not originally what I was thinking. And then what came out of my mouth was like, yes, I would love for you to pray over me. That'd be great. I'll catch you outside in a little bit. But I know that doesn't always work, right? It definitely does not always play out like that. I can imagine what you're thinking right now. And if you've been in a situation before where somebody maybe perhaps has otherwise, maybe did a gesture, maybe did some kind of gesture for you, or said something to you, or maybe asked you a question, or approached you in a way that, or even maybe you've been in a situation where there was no dialogue, there was no conversation at all, but just the way that the vibe or the way that it felt was like, ooh, this person doesn't have the best of intentions, or, you know what, I'm good because this doesn't feel right. So let's talk a little bit more about like perception versus intention. Let's talk about how our emotional or spiritual state can shape the lens we hear through. Think about that for a second. So talking about like rewinding a little bit for like my day yesterday, like think about that. Like when you've been in that situation, how are you feeling in that moment? What was going on in your heart, in your mind? What kind of season were you in or are in? What happened to you an hour before that morning? You know, it could have very well been that we had one of those, like you had one of those days or one of those mornings that it was just like one thing after another, that you had a great plan, you woke up, you were feeling good, you're like, oh, today's going to be the day, we're going to have a positive day, I'm going to turn it around. And then maybe something like, kind of like put like a little pin in that situation, right? Things got turned upside down, life has been lifing. When it rains, it pours, whatever kind of like label or saying that we want to attribute to it, but things are just not going the way that we imagine them to be, whether it's like through a season that you're walking through, whether it's the day that you've been having or a week, whatever the case may be. But what we're carrying with us internally, what's locked tight inside, whether in our hearts, mentally, what we're keeping trapped up here, the way that you physically feel internally is absolutely going to alter and interpret and change the way that we perceive other people's intentions. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that, you know, we can share a little bit more, or think about the whole concept of that we as individuals have different love languages, right? We have different types of communication skills. Some of us are, communication comes to us a little bit more easily than others, or maybe perhaps we're on two different wavelengths. Maybe we're close friends, or we're spouses, or we're roommates, or we're family members, and we live under the same household, or we see each other at work on a day-to-day basis. However, physically what's happening to us and mentally what's happening to us, we are on way two different wavelengths, right? And if that's the case, which more likely it is, because no two people are the same, so where one person is coming from with good intentions could very well be perceived from the other individual as quite the opposite, whatever that may be, and you're just not on the same page. Sometimes pain makes us feel defensive or skeptical, even when someone's heart is pure and it's in the right place and it's intentional. It could be reversed. You know, think about maybe perhaps a time that you had good intentions when you wanted to help somebody out, or you wanted to do something good for somebody, or maybe perhaps something that you said to somebody, or maybe there was a gift that you gave to somebody, whatever the case may be, whether it was words, gifts, heck, it could even be like a smile that you gave somebody, and then they just was like straight resting face, not positive. Maybe they had caught an attitude, whatever the case may be. Especially if you're in a dynamic within like a household setting where, you know, you're feeling great, you've had a good day, things are on the up and up. Maybe your favorite song played on the radio, or maybe you heard a quote that lifted your spirits, or you had a great conversation with a friend, and then your person comes home, you know, the person that you share a roof with, whether it's like your friend, your family, your spouse, your child, whatever the case may be, and they are not acting the same way. And they come home and you're feeling good, and you're on cloud nine, you're on the up and up, and then you're like, hey, welcome home, how are you? And they're like, They shut you down. They maybe say something rude. Maybe they're short with you. Maybe they're passive. Maybe because they're passive, they're not saying anything at all to you. Maybe they go directly to another room. They slam the door. They brush past you. They don't acknowledge you. They don't have a conversation with you. What's interesting enough is that without having like an understanding or like communication style, there, like I said, like actions like that can be perceived in so many different ways. You know, when someone wants to intentionally, and I say intentionally, do something kind or nice for us, it could very, very well be perceived as, oh, you think you could do better than me? Oh, you think you're better at it than I am? Or you did it because you want to push me out of this job? Or, oh, you helped me do that around the house because you didn't think I was capable of doing it. I feel less than. A lot of times it's not necessarily the way that the other individual is making us feel. What it is about is what we're dealing with internally. How do we feel about ourselves internally? What are the things that we are emotionally carrying on, like with us, that we haven't released, that we haven't processed, that we haven't talked out loud about, that we haven't handed over to God? What are the things that we're carrying with us otherwise? Because those things that we're carrying with us that are weighing heavy down, metaphorically, on our shoulders, very, very much is going to determine how we interpret the actions of those around us. Period. Misinterpretation doesn't mean either person is wrong. That was one of the things that I feel like that was so important for me over the last couple of years, that I've learned not only with my friendships, but more importantly in my marriage, was that it doesn't necessarily mean that either person is in the wrong. It's just going back to the fact that we can't read somebody's mind. We don't know what somebody is going through. And first and foremost, like I said, it's important for us to do the work internally within ourselves. Once you begin that process, once you begin that journey of looking within, doing the work within, that's the point where then it's almost like, I like to think it was kind of like the curtain just kind of like, the veil lifts from our eyes, right? The curtain just kind of lifts up. And then in a way, we began to see the individual in a different light. That it's like, oh, okay, just because I work from home and they work away from home doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to have a bad day or they're going to have a bad day. And a lot of times when we get stuck with what's happening up here, like mentally for us, when we get stuck with whatever maybe somebody has told us in a past life, when we were maybe even younger, y'all, when we were younger, maybe there was something that somebody told us about how we were, or our personality, or maybe they're like, you're never gonna amount to anything, you're never gonna be good enough, you're going to fail, you're just wait, whatever the case may be, you're not going to see success, whatever that version of ourselves that otherwise we repetitively tell ourselves over and over. Whatever the story is that you're telling yourself, mentally you're keeping that in hindsight, right? And then what happens is that we have that like voice in our head that just keeps playing over and over, and then we miss the mark when somebody in our like circle, whether it's our community or our household, is helping us out and they're doing something, or maybe perhaps that they're going through it as well. We miss the mark because we're so entrapped with like what's happening mentally, what we're holding on to within our hearts, within our bodies internally, that we're so wrapped up in that mess that we're missing otherwise the parts of what's happening within the other person, the dynamic between the other person. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that either party is wrong. It doesn't mean that you're in the wrong. It doesn't mean that the other person is in the wrong. It just means that both parties are human. Tying this back to scripture, this specifically comes from the New International Version. So we're briefly going to talk a little bit about 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, which I absolutely love, because we can interpret somebody from the outside, their intentions, whatever they're saying, whatever they're doing. We can interpret that in a way that maybe perceived as it's not actually what it is, right? So like, for example, think about it like this. You could be doing a kind gesture for somebody, and I would like to think that when we do something like that, that we mean well, we have positivity in our heart, we have goodness in our heart, and we're wanting, for whatever the case may be, to do or say something kind to somebody. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be perceived from the other person like that. For example, let's just say that you decided to, I don't know, let's think about like, you decided to grab a cup of coffee for a friend, right? So you're out and about running errands, you're getting a coffee or tea for yourself. You're like, you know what, let me get a drink for my friend. I'll show up, I'll drop it off, and I'll surprise them. You drop it off, but your friend doesn't respond. You're like, hey, left something at your front door, left something on your desk at work. Hope you enjoy it. There are a lot of individuals that their love language is gifts. What does that mean? If you're not familiar with love languages, gifts, if gift giving is your love language, what that basically means is that you get a tickle, you get more joy, and you get a dopamine fix whenever you have something that you want to gift with good intentions to somebody, and where your love language, where everything just like hits a home run for you, is when that individual is excited, or they thank you for the gift, or they just like simply acknowledge the fact that you gave them the gift, or you sent them the text, whatever the case may be. But if it's like gift giving, then it's like, oh, and then it just like, there's closure, right? But what happens when you don't hear anything from that person? What happens when you drop that drink off on their desk at work, or you drop it off at their front doorstep, and you're like, hey, left you a little something, hope you have a great day, and you don't hear anything from them, and they don't respond back? A lot of times we might be guilty of going down this like rabbit hole, right? Like, oh, okay, now they're upset with me, now they're mad, I can't believe I did that. And I don't really necessarily go into detail, because I'm sure if you're listening to this or you're watching this online, your mind is probably like, oh, yep, been there, done that. But here's the thing, is like, what if we were to send the nice gesture of like a text message or a card, mail a card, or drop off the coffee to the front desk, or at the front door of the house? What if we were to do something like that and just let it go? Because it's more important about the gesture, like in the moment, than it is for the response. What would that look like for you if that was the case? Because God is looking inwardly, like, what were your intentions for it? Were your intentions for the fact that you dropped the coffee off at the front desk because you wanted your coworker to have a good day, and that was the most important part? Or are you wanting the recognition for it? Because God is not going to care about the recognition. He cares about, are we caring for others? Are we uplifting them without even purchasing anything? Are we holding that person close in our hearts? Are we praying? Are we praying about them? Are we praying for them? Are we being a blessing towards them? Are we doing something that is a small gesture that we're not posting about online, or we don't share it with a lot of people? Because God sees and hears all things. So what is the intention within your heart? That is the most important part. This specific verse reminds us, it can remind us that, again, God sees the heart behind every action that we take, even when we can't. Just as Samuel had preconceived ideas about who would be king, we too can make assumptions about others. We've all been there. We've all done it. We've all been there, right? Intentions based sometimes on what we see or feel in the moment. And that can change, especially for somebody like myself, spicy brain. That changes for me on like an hour to hour basis, maybe a 30-minute, 20-minute increment. It depends upon the day, right? Depends on the time of year. It depends on the day. Especially for me going through perimenopause, like my moods, my hormones, my actions, my moods, everything changes on like an hour to hour basis. And yeah. And so it's just signing up for that whirlwind of a time, the season that I'm in. But we too can definitely make assumptions about others' intentions. The scripture invites us to slow down and remember that only God truly knows the heart behind the gesture or the word that's taken place. Grace grows and goes in both directions. Can we extend grace to those who try to love or otherwise want to help us, even when their timing or their words don't feel right? We can only control the actions of ourselves. Sorry to say this, but we absolutely have no control over the actions of somebody else. We don't. We don't. What we can control is how are we going to otherwise act when someone else is choosing to show up for us, or whatever the case may be, want to pray over us, give us a gift of a gesture, wanting to reach out to us. We have the absolute control over how we're going to interact with them and act. But give yourself some grace. Be open and honest with that individual. Now, obviously, I mean, and sometimes it's going to be like, I'm not going to lie, sometimes it could be like a little bit of like the hard truth, you know, like let's just say you have somebody that just keeps giving you gift over gift. And it's maybe something like, I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine that I knew for a very long time. And there was a running joke between her and her friends and family. And her husband at the time was like telling everybody when they first got married that she collected cows, loved cows. The joke was on her or them, depending on how you look at it, because she did not like cows. Not that she hated cows, but she did not collect cow print type things, right? So it was this running joke, y'all, for several years and years. And so family members and friends and neighbors caught on to that running joke. And so this poor thing had so almost like a museum's worth, dare I say, of cow print products. So that would be a time where it's a nice gesture, but maybe early on be like, hey, thank you so much, but just so you know, I really don't like cow print. I really don't collect cow stuff. And then that's kind of like where, you know, that's like better earlier than later. But sometimes we do need to have those hard conversations, right, with individuals, because it's again, it's going back to like their heart's in the right place. They want to do something nice for her, but she just didn't want all this stuff, because it's like, she was like, what am I going to do with all these things? All these, it's funny items, but it's like, what am I going to do with all of it? So sometimes we do have to have that like heart-to-heart conversation with somebody, especially if it's like, hey, we know your heart's, your mindset, your heart's coming from the right place. But it's like having that like tough conversation, like that compliment type sandwich, and just being authentically open with that individual, right? No matter what the story is. But give yourself some grace. Give yourself enough grace and patience. Because if we can take a step back and appreciate the small gestures that otherwise maybe people are doing for us, think about the effect that it's going to take place within that other person. And then it just keeps, like a domino effect, it just keeps happening and going on from there. Healing is a process. I talked about that earlier. It's not going to happen overnight. I talk about it actually all the time. Healing is a process. And in fact, what better way to talk about healing? Because if you didn't know, that when I'm recording this, today is National Mental Health Day. Healing is a process. What's interesting is if you are following or you're friends with somebody through social media and you're following their journey, or you know them personally, or, you know, like myself, there are sometimes when I'm not gonna lie, you know, like I follow people on social media and I follow them for long enough and I'm like, I feel like I know them, but I really don't. But here's the thing, when we're following somebody's journey, whether we really know them or not in person, it could very well be that we've been there with them through a time that they were at their lowest point, right? And then there comes a day, and, you know, hopefully, you know, good vibes up, that there will be a day, that there absolutely will be a day that their life's going to turn around, that they're going to enter a new season of healing and processing, and they're going to have this glow up moment, right? And they're going to be smiling and laughing and doing things that bring them joy and showing up for others and showing up for themselves. And it could very well be, friend, that you're in a place in a season in your life where you are not quite there, that you're sitting in the thick of it, that you are in a state of still healing, that you haven't entered onto the other side of that. And sometimes what's going to happen, because we're only human, right? At the end of the day, we're only human. So if we're following somebody's story, or we're connecting with someone and they're coming out on the other side of things and they're on the like up and up, so to speak, a lot of times that is causing friction within our heart. That's going to stop you in your tracks. And this negative connotation is going to start entering your heart and your mind, of like, ooh, you know what? That doesn't really... were they faking it the whole time? Did they really go through that? Did they lie to me? Like, what's happened? You're going to feel betrayed. You're going to feel maybe perhaps that they're faking it, that they're Like, you're like, was I tricked? But what's happening is, it has nothing to do with that person. It has everything to do with the conflict and the restrictions that you have, like, tight on your heart, that's bound on your heart, because you're not releasing and you're not doing the work, and you're not wanting to enter that realm of healing for yourself. Everyone's journey is going to look a little bit different. The timing for everybody's going to be a little bit different. But like I said, be open to the fact that, I'm not going to lie, like, over the last couple of years, there have been, I'm like, speaking of, social media, like, following individuals, there have been times that a couple of years ago that there were people that I was actually following on, through their journey. And then it got to a place, because same thing, I was going through things myself, and where they were at in their life, it just didn't sit well with me in my spirit. And I was like, this really, it's not like I was judging them, but it just didn't feel like I could relate to them anymore for different reasons. And so I was like, you know what? It's time for me to unfollow them. It's time for me to put distance between myself and them, unfollow them, maybe set like a little bit of a boundary, maybe not look at their social content as much, whatever the case may be. But it's like taking like steps back a little bit, and then maybe then venturing in and then finding new friends, making new friends, new contacts, or following new people on social that I can't otherwise now relate to, in the new season that you're in. It could very well be that. But healing is a process. It is a process that is going to rear its wild, ugly head. But take it from somebody that has been through years where there have been times that I have held on to so much for so long before I even got into therapy, that then it took a time like for like me to like play catch up, and then it just like hits you all at once, and then it's a lot. Or it could be that I have also been through times where I've kept things to myself internally and then let it fester internally, and then that got ugly. And I don't recommend that for anybody. And now I'm actually in a season of my life where I am processing all the things, and I am talking it out loud, that it's just such a very different situation, that yes, it's uncomfortable, and yes, it doesn't feel good. But at the same time, it's like, I am feeling the things, and I am processing the things, and I don't want to hold on to all this stuff. And I want to, give myself grace. Like I was talking about earlier, giving ourselves grace, giving other individuals grace. Because for me, it's like doing the work as I'm going along yes, it's hard. Yes, it sucks, but the reward is so much greater than you guys holding on to it for so long and letting it take a toll on our health, take a toll on not only our physical health, but our mental health as well, and affect everyone else around us too. I don't want to look back like 15, 20 years from now and then be like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to do the work all over again. I've been holding on to these grudges. I've been, burning bridges left and right, that I've been holding on to all of this, like, whatever the case may be, like I used to be that person. But I'm like, no, like I deserve better than that. You deserve better than that. So it's important to do the work and give yourself grace and give others grace in return. God honors the honesty that we have with him. When we can take time out of our day, even for like a second, and be honest with not only like how we're feeling internally, but what's going on in our life. Or maybe even reflecting on like that exact moment that came to mind today during this podcast session, of that memory, or maybe that something happened recently to you where you're like, ooh, okay, that moment came to mind. This happened to me the other day. This happened to me last week. Showing up and being honest with not only yourself, but more importantly, being honest and having an open conversation and dialogue with God, because God already knows exactly what was on your heart. He knew exactly what was going through my mind that day when I was walking through the grocery store. He knew what was going through my mind the moment my feet hit that parking lot pavement. But I knew that I had to have a conversation with him and just be honest with myself and show up with him, because he honors honesty in all areas of our life. When we're honest with him, that is a moment. That is a beautiful moment. When honesty is where it's at. God can still work through the imperfect interactions that we have. Every moment that we have on our day-to-day life is not always going to be perfect, right? We are imperfect beings. But he's always going to show up and work with us in those imperfect interactions, even when our hearts are guarded. Even if you're at a place where maybe perhaps you have either been through something or you're going through something where you're like, I just can't release it. It's holding me, it's restricting me, and I just don't know how to let it go. Sometimes the message isn't meant for right now, but perhaps it becomes a little clearer later down the road. Maybe perhaps when our perspective has shifted. Maybe like myself, if you're like myself and you like to give it a couple hours, maybe another day, and then your brain is just like, you know what? It's time for us to reflect on that. Let's take a moment for that. Maybe you're like that. A challenge that I want to give you guys this week is I want you to ask yourself, who might be showing you love or support in a way you have not recognized yet? I just want to think about that. I'll say it one more time. Who might be showing you love this week? Who's showing you love or support in a way that you haven't recognized yet? Think about that. And before we close out, I want you to take a deep breath. In, out, release it. And as long as you are in a safe space, don't close your eyes if you're driving. But I just want to take a little bit moment before we wrap up, and I just want to say a prayer for you. Lord, thank you so much for coming into this space with us this week. I am so grateful to have those that are connecting with me, and I just pray that whoever's listening or watching this podcast for this week, that you come into their heart with not only great and positive intentions, but to release whatever it is that they are holding deep within their hearts, whatever that they are reflecting on that they have not yet healed from, the journey that they're going through, the healing that's taking place. God, I just ask you to just come into their minds, come into their hearts, for them to have peace, for them to have healing, for them to be able to walk into this season of their life that they are so very well deserved to be able to have, for them to be able to make connections from all the others, but to be able to see the good in everything that's around them, and for them to be a brighter light for those that they come into contact with. Amen. Sometimes the hardest part of faith isn't necessarily believing in God. Closing thought for us for this week is that it's believing that others can still be vessels of his kindness, even when our hearts are tired. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me this week. I don't know why, but I feel like that there is a shift in the air. It's like there's a shift in the air, shift in the universe. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I'm feeling it. And it's a good shift. It's a bright light. It's a good shift. I hope you have an incredible day, incredible week, no matter where you're at, no matter where you're listening to this. Thank you for hanging out with me. I value your time, and I just appreciate you guys so much. So until next time, don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos.